Now, we can't forget plants, right? All the while, animals are evolving, so are plants. Remember that during the Paleozoic, plants evolved to be spore-bearing, like ferns. They then evolved to have seeds, like gymnosperms and conifers, ginkgos, things like that. However, during the beginning of the Mesozoic, during the beginning of the dinosaurs, there were no flowering plants. There were no angiosperms. It was not until the early Cretaceous, the very last period of the Mesozoic, that angiosperms evolved and the very first flowers showed up on Earth. So before the Mesozoic came to a close, not only did angiosperms evolve, they actually proliferated and surpassed the non-flowering plants in their abundance and diversities. So flowering trees, shrubs, vines spread across the land and gave the landscape a very modern appearance. The only thing that wasn't quite like today was that there still wasn't any grasses. Angiosperms, flowering plants, provide an example of coevolution with Mesozoic insects, dinosaurs, mammals, and birds. Coevolution just means that two or more organisms evolve together very closely in the same environment. There's that reciprocal relationship. They are both influencing the other. An example of this is that many of the great sauropod dinosaurs, remember, those are the ones that had really long necks to eat a lodge of vegetation that was far away. So these dinosaurs subsisted largely on ferns, horsetails, tree-sized club mosses, conifers, things like that. But these plants tend to grow slowly, which means that the regeneration might not have been able to keep pace with the dinosaur consumption. And so if dinosaurs ate too much in a single area, that vegetation would go away for long periods of time because they overbrowsed. And that would mean that there was room for shrub-like angiosperms to grow up in their place. And angiosperms reproduce rapidly, they disperse easily, which means that they were able to grow a lot and they weren't overbrowsed because they were able to quickly be replaced, right? Quickly grow again. So sauropods actually relied on angiosperms in order to eat, and angiosperms relied on sauropods to eat away all of the other plants and give them room to grow. And now we hit our second mass extinction of the Mesozoic era, and this is the mass extinction that ended the Mesozoic era. So if you remember from last time, we talked about how the end of the Mesozoic was already starting to not be a very hospitable Earth. A lot of creatures were slowly dying, slowly going extinct. And then there was the catastrophe that sealed it all. So the late Cretaceous catastrophe eliminated about 60 to 70% of life on Earth. Now, this is not the most extensive extinction by any means, right? It's actually a fairly small extinction compared to all the other mass extinctions, but it was still a really important mass extinction. In the ocean, the plesiosaurs, the mosasaurs, the ammonites, they all perished. Entire families of echinoids, bryozoans, planktonic foraminifera, calcareous phytoplankton became extinct, right? Not all of them, but a lot of species within them, a lot of families within them. 90% of all species of coccolithophores and planktonic foraminifera were extinguished. Remember, these are the organisms we often use as climate proxies, meaning we look at their shells to figure out the climate of the past. And a lot of them went extinct during this time. Not all, but a lot. On land, the most notable loss was of the great clans of reptiles, right? Gone forever were the huge, magnificent dinosaurs, the soaring pterosaurs. The only reptiles to survive were those that we still know today, being the turtles, the snakes, the lizards, the crocodiles, and the New Zealand's reptile, the tuatara. Now you might be asking yourself, well, what caused this mass extinction? It was a meteorite impact, right? The Chihuahua meteorite impact is the widely accepted theory for the mass extinction. This asteroid landed in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, right in our Gulf of Mexico. And the impact would have ejected enormous amounts of debris into the atmosphere. right? This would have blocked out solar radiation because of all of the dust and debris in the atmosphere, causing temperatures to drop. And the impact may have also caused a lot of local fires, earthquake, tsunamis, acid rain, just all around a bad time. Now, this extinction wasn't immediate. It wasn't at a snap of the finger, everything died, right? Instead, it happened slowly due to a cascade of events, some dominoes that all fell over, creating it hard, making it harder and harder and harder for organisms to survive. The very first thing that happened was heating of the atmosphere by re-entry of the particles ejected by the impact, right? So the asteroid comes, collides with Earth, shoots up lots of debris. That debris then falls back down to Earth. And as it's falling back down to Earth, it's heating up, breaking down, creating a lot of heat upon re-entry. All right, so atmospheric temperatures near the surface could have reached the level of a broiling oven. Fire or even just really, really hot air would have been lethal to many species. Then, after that quick increase in temperature, after all of those particles that were ejected landed back down to Earth, fell back down to Earth, then it got cold, right? Because now the finer particles, the dust, the ash, they stayed in the atmosphere for days to months, which blocked out Earth's access to sunlight and made for, a very dark, cold period. Okay? So the organisms that were able to survive that really quick increase in temperature might not have been able to survive this long, cold, dark period because vegetation needs sunlight to photosynthesize. So a lot of vegetation died. When vegetation dies, organisms that eat vegetation die. When they die, organisms that eat those organisms die, right? So a chain of effect here. So again, not only was there low light during this period, there was prolonged global cooling, and we call this the impact winter, right? The winter caused by the impact of this meteorite. The freeze line could have actually moved down near the equator during this time period, right? Can you imagine freezing near the equator? So cooling was drastic here. So first, huge increase in temperature. Second, the sunlight was blocked out and it got dark. Following that, it got cold because it was dark. Following that, it started to warm up again. And this is because there were a lot of greenhouse gases that were released during that meteorite impact, right? The meteorite hit Earth, released a lot of debris. Some of that debris carried a lot of greenhouse gases with it. And over the longer period of time, those warmed Earth. Estimate ranges range about from a few degrees to more than 7 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. This is like a 13 degrees Fahrenheit increase in temperature. Right? Now, organisms that were lucky enough to survive all of these changes in temperature might have then been taken out by the acid rain. So anytime you have vaporized sulfate-bearing evaporates in our atmosphere, which is what happens when a meteorite impacts Earth and sends those things up into the atmosphere, you can create acid rain. Acid rain is just rain that's acidic, and a massive injection of carbon dioxide would have produced a lot of acid rain, a lot of carbonic acid being produced. And when the rain returned back down to Earth, it was raining acid, right? Which could have caused even more animals to die during this time period. Now, we know that not all animals went extinct, right? We're still around, so some animals had to make it through. Small animals tended to be the ones who were able to survive. For example, small mammals, those little shrew-like creatures, were less impacted by the meteorite because they didn't need a lot of resources to survive, right? The big dinosaurs, they had to eat a lot to stay alive, whereas the small mammals, they didn't need as much. So when a lot of food went away, they could still scrounge up enough to survive. And this is what allowed them to persist through that mass extinction. And then when the Earth recovered after that meteorite impact, mammals were able to proliferate into those new open niches and fill in the roles that dinosaurs once held.